I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the Lexus LX, the flagship luxury SUV from the Japanese brand Lexus. Now, if you're a car enthusiast, you'll know that under the skin, the Lexus LX is basically a rebodied 200 series Toyota Land Cruiser. So whereas some full-size luxury SUVs are really just raised cars, this thing is actually a serious four-wheel drive that will get you to some very serious locations. And now you'll be able to drive an LX 570 if you buy one, obviously, or if you buy any of Lexus's other flagship products. Because not only are we looking at this LX 570 today, but I can also tell you that Lexus are introducing here in Australia for the first time a new program called Encore Platinum that basically lets you buy any of this brand's top spec cars, so the beautiful LC two-door that we've reviewed on the channel, the LS four-door that we've reviewed, this LX that we're doing together right now, and also the brand's full-fat F cars, will let you basically dab in and out of the other cars in Lexus's range for a number of bookings up to 8 days in length over the first 3 years of your ownership. And so there's basically now the ability to buy one but tap into all of the rest, and also Lexus's other vehicles beyond, which is kind of cool. And we'll talk about more of the mechanics of how Lexus Encore Platinum works later on. Mainly, we're chatting about the LX today, which is absolutely a large and in charge vehicle. I don't think you could possibly argue with that. There's no missing it on the road. Big petrol V8 engine under the bonnet, and a seriously sumptuous interior that'll make you forget all about the fact this thing is effectively a Land Cruiser underneath. So in today's video, we're going to jump into the cabin, check out the interior and the back seat, and then take this thing out on the road to see how Lexus's flagship SUV drives. Before we do that, make sure to hit subscribe down below and the notification bell. Leave me a comment at any point if you have anything to say about the LX or whether you think this kind of car subscription program is a good idea. And with that, let's crack on inside. Befitting its status as one of the flagships of the Lexus range, climbing up into the LX reveals a really beautiful interior that feels about as expensive as this car is. You know, you don't feel like you're being shortchanged. It doesn't feel like a Toyota, even though the LX is based on the remarkable underpinnings of the 200 series Land Cruiser. This vehicle has a totally different interior. Like, it's very hard to find stuff that is shared between the two of them. You can do it, but if you're not used to the Land Cruiser, then you just won't find any of them. As you can see in the Lexus, the dashboard is really broad. It's kind of all built around this really strong piece of real wood here in the center. In fact, all the woods and all the leathers you see in here are totally legit, and that helps with the feeling that this is a very sumptuous premium place to be sitting. Now, we've got a big screen above this wood trim here that's really wide, so it presents you a really nice landscape to view the sat-nav on, your multimedia options, digital radio, Bluetooth. Sadly, no Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. We'll probably be waiting for the next version of the Lexus LX to see those. But all of those audio options it does have are hooked up to an absolutely phenomenal Mark Levinson reference grade stereo that sounds absolutely banging. Now, in front of me, I have traditional analog gauges. They're like luminescent, so they look really classy, and they do have a digital color screen between them. It's only small, but you do get a digital speedo and your other trip computer readouts and media and directions, so it's not too bad. And then also a big color heads-up display too. Steering wheel is not that big, which is nice, because otherwise this would feel like a truck. So that's quite small, even if it is a bit like a truck to drive, as we'll find out in just a minute. We're also sitting on seats that are all-day comfortable, really creamy, soft, semi-aniline leather. Almost like a cream-like color in this car, but you can get other hues as well, including a more utilitarian black. Now, this exact car is one of the vehicles that customers in the Lexus Encore Platinum program will be able to book. This is one of those specific vehicles. This isn't a media tester. This is available on the app. So if you've bought a Lexus LC, LS, LX, or F car from the start of 2020, the 1st of January, you'd be able to book this car here in Sydney. You'll be able to use the program in the capital cities and also through dealers, so it's a really nice little benefit if you've bought a flagship level Lexus. And the brand hints that it might expand to other vehicles in the Lexus range in future as well. So something to think about, nice little cherry on top if you buy a car like this. So with that in mind, the front seat's pretty impressive. Let's check out the back. Now, if you've bought a Lexus like the LC, beautiful but not practical, same thing with the sports cars of this brand, and you want to go to the snow or you want to go camping or something like that, the LX is the car that you'll want to get, because not only is it exceptionally capable when the going gets a little bit tougher, but the interior is also way more practical and spacious for more than just those sitting up front. So here in the second row, you can see that for myself at 6 foot, headroom's good, legroom's good, tow room, it's just okay, but you can fit 3 adults across easily. And then there's another 3 seats in the third row. This is an 8-seater, it's a big car, and it's a sumptuous car for basically everybody involved. We've got air vents down here, we've got air vents up here, we've got air vents back there. We have these screens behind the front seat that you can load media into. We have a flip down armrest with a climate control console, heated and cooled seats here in the second row, just like up front. I mean, it's properly luxurious back here. So if you want to take the family away on a longer road trip, hitting up an LX is going to be a pretty good option. And if you have little kids, built-in sunshades are going to keep the sun off their face. Always a touch that I quite like to see. Heading around here to the back of the LX, and this Lexus four-wheel drive is actually available in a range of colors. You only ever seem to see them in white, black or gray, which is a little depressing, but you can be a bit more crazy. This one is a champagne gold, very 1990s, but there are actually some real colors available too. Now, as you'd expect, given the price, we have a fully power tailgate set up back here. It takes a minute, but you get the sequential indicators to let you know it's on its way. Split tailgate, much like a Land Cruiser. We have a second portion down here that just has a little bit of hydraulic so it doesn't slam down. It's quite nicely damped. And it reveals a good sized boot. Now, practicality is impeded a little bit by the fact we have the third row seats that stack upward against the side of the vehicle. They don't go down to the floor. That's because we have a full size spare underneath the body. So there's just kind of not room to package a folding seat. So that's okay. Still heaps of room for all the family's suitcases. Just keep in mind, if you are using it as an 8-seater, you're not going to have all that much luggage space left over if you take this thing on a trip to the snow, which I think a lot of people will. Now, we do have a proper Australian power socket back here, and we have electronic controls to fold those seats, and of course another button for the power tailgate. I'm forgetting we have to do this bit first, and then it's a matter of pressing that button. This comes down, we can jump into the driver's seat and see what this behemoth is actually like to drive. So, what is the Lexus LX 570 like to drive? Well, this is a big brute of a thing. I mean, that much is probably evident from just looking at it. It's large and it's in charge, and that's basically the vibe that the LX gives off on the road. Even though it's not actually that long, there are a great many SUVs actually, not even just four-wheel drives, that are longer than this vehicle. It's very, very wide, it's very tall, and the driving position is absolutely commanding. It easily gives Range Rover a run for their money in terms of a command driving position, and I think probably surpasses that vehicle as well, because you simply sit on top of the LX, you have an absolutely phenomenal view forward over the sculpted bonnet, massive mirrors, big side windows. In fact, the visibility isn't too bad because it's so large and has so much glass. And because of that imposing front end, you really do find that other traffic tends to move out of your way, or at least doesn't cut in front of you like they do in a smaller vehicle, so I suppose that's a plus. Now, the LX comes in 2 flavors in Australia. A petrol V8, which is of course the traditional engine for a Lexus LS, and Lexus avoided diesel engines for many years in Australia out of refinement concerns. So here in the LX 570, the badge gives it away, a 5.7 litre petrol V8, naturally aspirated, direct injected, producing 270 kilowatts of power and 530 newton meters of torque. So it's pretty strong, and that's the way it feels on the road. Now, this isn't a V8 that's designed to make bulk power. In fact, it feels very understressed in the power department. It's more about low-end torque. So at the moment, just ticking along at about 1400 revs, you just sort of dab the throttle and you start picking up speed easily as it just glides through 2000 revs and beyond. So you can rev it right out, and if you do, like if we listen now, it makes all the right petrol V8 noises, but you don't actually make astonishing progress despite the sound. So it's more a car that you just drive along gracefully. Now, you can get an LX 450D diesel with a 4.5 litre twin turbo diesel V8 straight out of the Land Cruiser 200, and that produces 200 kilowatts of power and 650 Newton meters of torque. So a lot less power, but quite a bit more torque, and it feels even more effortless. So if you're going to tow heavy loads, the diesel makes a lot of sense. But remember that diesel is a less highly specified vehicle. It doesn't have a third row, it doesn't have the rear DVD screens. So family buyers usually go for the 570. Of course, the whole beauty of the Lexus Encore Platinum program, which is being launched in Australia this week, is that you don't actually have to own this vehicle. I think most people's garages are pretty tight, at least if you live in inner city Sydney or Melbourne, and so something as large as an LX is going to be a big ask. However, if you own one of this brand's smaller flagship vehicles, for example an LC, if you have that as your kind of second car, or if you have an RCF or a GSF or even a flagship LS sedan, then you can dip in and out of these vehicles or Lexus's more mainstream product as well. So if you're going to the snow, for example, you can grab an LX for the week. If you own an LX, conversely, and you want to sample the LC, you can drop in and out of that car as well. So it's kind of that flexibility and starting to think of these cars as subscription services. And Lexus are one of the first to move on this in a big way in Australia. Now, the ride and handling of the LX is truck-like. As it comes, it has air suspension, and you can tell it what sort of firmness you want. So in comfort, it is, pretty boaty, plush, good for the highway, good for everyday driving, soaks up imperfections really nicely. On a curving road like the one I'm on now, you do want the sport damping, as it just cinches the body control in. I'm not going to lie to you, the body control is fairly nautical no matter what you do, but it is better in sport than in comfort. And this is still a body-on-frame vehicle like the Land Cruiser 200, so it's really hard to isolate all the sort of lateral jiggles that you get in this kind of car, and so it goes for the LX, but they've done a pretty good job. I would say it's a very refined, very comfortable, supple vehicle, and it's probably not a vehicle I'd want to drive every single day because of the sheer size of the thing, but as a vehicle that you could jump in and out of as part of a subscription, that's when it starts to make a lot more sense, I think. So those are our detailed impressions of the 2020 Lexus LX 570 4x4, a vehicle which in my opinion is now a whole lot more useful because you pretty much get an LC, an LS and Lexus F cars thrown in, at least for short bursts of time, that is. But I'm keen to know what you think about this very luxurious version of Toyota's Land Cruiser. So let me know below the video, and let me know whether you think these car subscription sorts of programs are a good idea for the Australian market and whether you'd consider taking one on in future. While you're there, make sure to hit the notification bell, and as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.